Big is good. Big is good. I'm talking about Jeff, who I photographed here in Pittsburgh on a date that I do not remember. But I just remember Jeff walking past me in a black leather jacket that had on both shoulders these rich colored images of Rose and of 8-Ball. And I said, "Well, I love that jacket." And he said, "Well, if you like that." And he took off the jacket, and he had 2 tattoos that were exactly like the jacket. So it's just really kind of wonderful to have that happen. Bernadette and Bob. Steve, who really is the kind of the centerpiece of the whole exhibit, because I met Steve back in 1981 at a tattoo parlor in Union City, New Jersey, run by a guy named Shotzi Gorman, and I just love that somehow he collected all of the stereotypes that I had held in my head about what this project would be all about, which later got demolished, but early on he kind of confirmed some of my early stereotypical kind of behaviors towards what is a tattoo and what does a tattooed person look like. And Chris? I don't have a lot to say about Chris, except he seemed to have organized himself in wardrobe and tattoo and demeanor in a really collected kind of way. He really had Chris down pat. The Chris he brought to the convention was highly organized Chris. Sandy, who I met in Ann Arbor, Michigan, she was tattooed by Suzanne Fauser, an elementary art teacher turned tattooist. And Sandy was the first person I think I'd ever met and photographed who brought props with her that mimicked and resonated with the exact tattoo that Suzanne had put on her leg in a really dramatic kind of presentation of real life and tattoo together. Trudy and Joe, my all-time favorite lovebirds from Youngstown, Ohio. I was making photographs all day in this little motel room. I went to sleep, and after midnight there's a knock on the door. It was Trudy and Joe, and they said, "Are we too late?" And I said, "No, you're not too late. And I will wake up and I will put this all back together." And we made pictures for about a half hour, and then I figured out through that they were a couple. They didn't come just together. They really were together. And I said, "Why don't you just stand together for a moment?" And that's what they gave to me, which was just so wonderful. Wow, Virginia. Talk about velvety black. Virginia I photographed in Seattle, Washington, on my last kind of junket to kind of cross the states and meet the 10 most important, in my estimation, tattooists working in the country in the late 90s. Richard, who I met early on at a convention in the Meadowlands, and I was just wandering around the floor looking for likely subjects, and I bumped into Richard, and I said, I think I said, "Richard, that's probably the nastiest tattoo I've ever seen in my life," and he just kind of half smiled, and then we made some pictures. So that was Richard. Kim, again, who I met at the Meadowlands at a convention, I photographed it and brought home and made prints, and didn't notice until I'd made big prints that she clearly has gone through something that has caused her face to have the sense of reconstructed change that in some way, for me, just balances this dramatic singular tattoo on her arm. I don't have a lot to say. She came with 3 or 4 friends. Megan came, who's also part of the exhibit, came with Olivia, and they all were tattooed by the same artist, and it's easy to see that the marks on Olivia and the marks on Megan are just so same, so similar. Tim, I know I photographed at one of Tim Azinger's Meeting of the Mark conventions. I don't have a lot more to say about Tim. I think he still works in Pittsburgh. Remove this a little bit. Clark was part of my last cross-country tour. He lived in Anaheim, California, photographed by a tattooist named Terry Barba, and I just was struck by his love, apparently strong attachment to his mother, and to the photograph that appears with him now forever. Lolita, who I met in Pittsburgh again at one of the conventions, Meeting of the Mark conventions, who typically I would go look for subjects, but Lolita came and found me and dragged me to the studio and said, let's make pictures. So that was the message of Lolita, and of course I love the way she organized herself for the camera. Tori was so early on in the process. It was when I just left Pittsburgh to go visit other tattooists in their shops, and I went to Hackettstown, New Jersey, and late one night at the end of a long evening, Tori showed up with a tattoo he had just recently gotten to celebrate the birth of his child, Cherish, and stood patiently for me and smoked a cigarette while we made photographs in the studio. Wow, Josh. He looks good. I've never seen Josh at this scale, so it's pretty amazing. Josh. I don't have a lot to bring to Josh. I'm sorry. Without words for Josh. Diane and Rick were so early in the process. When I was visiting Nick Bubash and McKees Ross, and they came together as a couple, and she was clearly his support system for this incredibly important moment of transformation. And when they were done, I said, why don't you guys just stand together and let me make a photograph, and this is what came from that request. John, I met in Ann Arbor, Michigan. He was a client of Suzanne Bowser's, who I mentioned was a former elementary art teacher turned tattooist. And I think I was just so taken with the symmetry of his vision for himself and the way it got realized on his chest. Jim, I don't have a lot to say about, but I know I met Jim in Columbus, Ohio. He was a client of Marty Holcomb's, and in some ways it was my challenge with Jim was to connect a back with a face, which was what was the essence for me of all of these images. How do you connect that face with the work and with what's going on the skin? I think I'll go back in here easier, Doug, once we get in. There's Margie. who showed up in Anaheim, California, one of Carrie Barba's subjects, and had just graduated law school and had such a sweetness about her and had a tattoo that seemed sinister and troublesome in some ways to me. And who knows how that fits with Margie, but Dan and Breeze from the Meadowlands Convention in New Jersey. Dan's the first guy I ever saw who had his head tattooed. And so I said, let's go make a portrait, and we did, and then Breeze showed up, and as is always my custom at the end, I said, why don't you guys just stand together and let me make a portrait, and that's where Dan and Breeze came from. All right, yeah, I won't take that. It's goofy, because we'll get it back. Tony also is a Suzanne Fauser, Ann Arbor subject who came highly organized about his history and his roots and his being in both his wardrobe and in the tattoos that Suzanne had given him. Megan came to Pittsburgh to the meeting of the March from Boone, North Carolina with Olivia and some other friends, and I just remember when she walked into the room, I said, you're like the spikiest person I've seen all day, because she just had a life of spike, both in the work. Oh, that's it. So.